Just good evening and afternoon and morning to everyone joining today's webinar entitled Safer Mines for Women, Tackling Gender-Specific Hazards in Mining. My name is Nathan Schneck, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's discussion. I work as a consultant for the World Bank, where I manage the Delve platform, a global data and knowledge initiative focused on recognizing the artisanal and small-scale mining sector's contributions to global development. This is the second in a three-part series of virtual events celebrating the launch of the 2023 State of the ASM Sector Report. The report is a semi-annual flagship product for the Delve initiative that analyzes the sector's linkages to a sustainable development goal and also showcases the work that's being done by a variety of organizations and researchers to support the sector. The 2023 report itself examines the intersection of ASM and SDG 5 and the steps that are needed to take to achieve gender equality for the sector. Suzanne, if you can go to the next slide. We're going to hear from a collection of report contributors and authors today with our discussion. It's going to focus on accounting for the gender differences in occupational health and safety at mine sites. We'll hear from the report's co-editor, Dr. James McQuilkin, will be providing an overview of this year's report, and then we'll dig into the occupational health and safety chapter with our lead authors, Professor Jingani Moyo and Dr. Josephine Singo. After that, we'll hear from two of our case study contributors, Gracia Kabilambali from DRC and Aline Providence Nikonibisa from Rwanda, and then engage in a brief panel discussion, which will open up to your questions and be taking those to discuss with our panelists today. Just a few housekeeping notes. We are planning to have simultaneous translation for Gracia's intervention, which will be in French. So please make sure to set your language interpretation as English. Additionally, please submit your questions via the Q&A tab or the chat tab on the Teams app during the presentation, so we have those queued up for discussion later. Additionally, my colleague Suzanne will put into the chat a link where you can find the full report online to access the 2023 report, to download it, read more about it, look at some of the visuals around the surveys that were performed for the report itself. And then lastly, we are recording this presentation so that it can be shared on YouTube through the Delve platform account. We'll share that recording and a link to that in a follow-up email with you all as well. So thank you so much for joining. Suzanne, if you want to go to the next slide. Just before we get into the meat of our discussion, I wanted to offer a very brief introduction on artisanal and small-scale mining, or as you'll hear it today, abbreviated as ASM. The term ASM is used to describe a range of mining activities that occurs at a smaller scale than industrial operations. It can be as little as a handful of people up to several thousand working together. It's primarily characterized by mining methods that employ basic tools or limited mechanization to extract and process a variety of minerals. The most common mineral by employment being gold in the sector, but ASM also produces gemstones, critical minerals like cobalt, tantalum, tungsten, and tin, manganese, mica, and then also development minerals like sand, stone aggregate, and many others. The sector itself is a critical rural livelihood for over 44 million people and occurs across over 80 countries from the Americas to Africa to Asia. Artisanal miners can be found producing minerals for the global economy and contributing to global development around the world. Women play a critical role in the sector. We estimate in this report that 13.4 million women are working in ASM worldwide, comprising 30% of the global ASM workforce. Often, though, women's contributions to the sector have been overshadowed by men who garner the lion's share of attention due to their primary roles in digging and extraction. As you'll find in the report, women's contributions are often marginalized due to social and cultural and other factors that push them to lower paying jobs on the peripheries of the mines or in service roles at mine sites. But what I think is also really helpful to find in the report as you dig in is that there's really some great examples that showcase female leadership that's being developed through women in mining organizations or other interventions that we'll hear from today, really helping create that level playing field and participation for women in the sector. Before we jump into the discussion, we're going to hear from the report's contributors through a showcase video that we have where they discuss this topic of gender equality in ASM. So I'll turn it over to you, Suzanne. I hope you enjoyed that message from our collection of contributors to this year's report. It's also available on the Delve YouTube page, and we'll make sure that's shared in a follow-up email with you all after this. Right now, I want to bring on Dr. James McQuilkin to join me on stage. Dr. McQuilkin is the director of responsible mining at Pact, a Washington, D.C. based international NGO. There he leads the responsible mining practice and is a social scientist specializing in sustainable development at ASM. He brings over 10 years of experience in the sector and has served as the author and editor of the State of the Sector report dating back to 2019. So James, welcome, and we look forward to hear from you about the report series and the context for this 2023 report.
Excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Nathan, for that warm introduction as well. So yes, let's get into it. So to really set the scene for the 2023 report we're discussing today, let's have a quick look at the first Delve report, which really aims to understand the state of the data that we have on ASM. And in the 2019 report, we actually found that there was indeed this global artisanal and small-scale mining data gap. And that many estimates on the number of people working in ASM are outdated, with some of the numbers being recycled from the 1990s. That 2019 report therefore called for complete, accurate and reliable data to inform policymaking on the sector. And this really then created the foundation from which we then undertook the 2020 report, which focused on SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. And through the analysis in that report, we found that investments in occupational health and safety are urgently needed. We also found that better economic and social data, especially on women's work, is needed. And we also need disaggregated data by gender. So let's go to the next slide. So it was really these findings from that 2020 report that then inspired the 2023 report, the focus of which, as noted, is gender equality, and of course an entire chapter there, which we're discussing today, dedicated to occupational health and safety. So in terms of what does the 2023 report look like? Well, the 2023 report has 3 chapters. We have 14 case studies. We have 12 countries across 3 regions, and they are contributed, these case studies, by 23 organizations. So just wanted to share those data points, given that Delve is about data, and also thank all of the contributors around the world for all of the case studies, which, as Nathan mentioned, really showcase some of these ongoing solutions to address gender equality in ASM. Next slide, please. So how exactly was the 2023 report produced, and what was the approach we took? Well, first, we began, and indeed the report begins, with a literature review. We aimed to chart the role of women in ASM and the so-called invisibility crisis. Simply put, we state that women in ASM are not being counted. Next, we undertook a legal analysis. So we reviewed the mining codes and property laws in 21 countries. And we found that 67% of those mining codes and 80% of property right laws are gender blind or gender neutral, meaning they either do not consider gender-related issues, so therefore they're blind, or they do not distinguish based on gender, making them neutral. And the table here, it's a little bit blurry on my screen, but that's in the report, and it gives you a breakdown of that analysis there and the findings for each country. So based on this background, we then explored these issues through 3 surveys. And this was the first time through the Delve report we've been able to undertake primary data collection, which was undertaken in many different countries and by a range of partners. So thank you to those partners. The surveys targeted government officials, women in mining groups, and actually miners themselves. And we had a staggering 1,900 respondents, with 67% of respondents being female. So thank you to all that undertook the data collection, and you can find all of that data and the analysis in the report, and indeed we're going to be discussing more today. Next slide, please. So based on that data and the analysis, we make 3 main recommendations, which are shown on the screen here, and these 3 recommendations are reflected in the report's 3 chapters, so it's structured in these 3 themes. And for today's conversation, we're focused on chapter 3, which is account for gendered differences in occupational health and safety efforts at mine sites. So let's go to the next slide, where we will get a bit more into some of those findings around OHS in ASM. So what did we find? Well, the data showed that women in ASM are being exposed to more and a much greater rate of environmental health impacts than men. And on the right-hand side in this graph, it breaks down the different types of environmental impacts that both male and female miners were reporting as impacting them recently. And indeed, we see that women were impacted greatly, and also the vast array of environmental impacts there that then have negative health consequences. So we found that 34%, which is 651 miners out of 1,897 surveyed, reported that there was indeed an increase in these negative environmental impacts on women over the last few years. So in recent years is the term we used. Another key finding when we were asking whether miners in the mine site survey had access to maternal health and sexual reproductive care is that 34% of those miners were reporting that there was no maternal or sexual health care available near artisanal and small-scale mine sites, which again is really a negative impact, especially for women there. A third key finding from the data from our surveys, and again with the miners here, was that girls are at higher risk of child marriage in ASM communities than boys. And actually, they are 11 times more women were reported as being married under the age of 18 compared to men. So again, there's that differentiated impact where occupational health and safety risks are differentiatedly or more exacerbated or increased for women versus men. And so we need to address that. And so finally, just to summarize then, and really the focus of the discussion today is So we therefore need to account for these gender differences in occupational health and safety for women in ASM. And I believe through the rest of the call today, we'll hear more on this discussion, on this topic, and some example case studies around how we can try and account for these differences to ensure gender equality. So thank you very much. Looking forward to the rest of the discussions. And back to you, Nathan.
Thank you, James. I'm going to now invite Dr. Josephine Singo and Professor Dingani Moyo to join me on stage. We can pull down the slides, Suzanne, so we can see our two lead authors for the report's third chapter on OHS and gender differences. So feel free to take down the screen share. Great. Just to introduce, we have Professor Moyo joining us. He's a specialist in occupational physician, an OHS consultant, an academic and researcher, and holds a number of specialist qualifications in occupational health and safety, including a number of master's degrees in occupational health and safety and health services, and has served in a variety of capacities at a regional and international OHS organizations, and currently is a lecturer for the National University of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe, and a senior lecturer at Wits University in South Africa. So thank you, Professor Moyo, for joining us. We also have Dr. Josephine Singo with us. Dr. Singo is a global health development professional who holds a PhD in international health from the University of Munich, and her passion is for a progressive, minor-centric, multi-stakeholder, gender-empowering approach for the enhancement of protective workplace practices in artisanal and small-scale mining. And she's got a number of experiences working with ASM-specific programs like Planet Gold and European Partnership for Responsible Minerals. So Josephine, it's great to have you as well. Feel free to share your camera and unmute as well. Just an opening question for you both, as serving as lead authors for the third chapter of the report, Accounting for Gender Differences at Mine Sites. Just wondering if you could provide us, the report itself gives a great overview of the different occupational health and safety risks faced by women in ASM. Can you give the audience a summary of how the report frames those different risks, and also share maybe one or two examples that stood out to you in the process of developing this chapter and reviewing the literature on this topic and your own personal and professional experience on this?
Thank you very much, Nathan. Dr. Moyo, can I start?
Yes, you can start. You can go ahead, then I'll come after you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I'd like to appreciate our participants and the organizers of this event. It was an exciting experience to participate in this section of the module, a section of the report. And the report reviewed that women are exposed to multiple hazards and risks without protection. And I'm going to share some of the risks that came out to me. And one of the, let me try and share my slide. Okay, I cannot, okay. So one of the risks that came out to me is the issue of unsafe shafts in small-scale mining. We have women exposed to unsafe shafts associated with mine collapses. And in one of the cases for this study, it was revealed that poor lighting was acting as a barrier against the full participation of women. And among 40 mines, there were only 2 women who were involved in underground mining, which speaks to the limited access to resources, as well as the limited access to finances or to the benefits from small-scale mining. So we see women taking peripheral and low-paying roles. At the same time, the issue of unsafe shafts also affects women indirectly. In small-scale mining, mine collapses are associated with injuries, while the men are more vulnerable to fatalities and accidents. The women are the carers for the injured. And it should be noted that this is happening in an environment where there is limited access to health care, and there is also no social security. So we have a situation where women can single-handedly bear the cost of injuries happening in the societies. So women are affected by injuries, both directly and indirectly. This is what came out for me.
Well, Dr. Moyo, I think you're muted. If you could
Oh,
just.
thank you very much, Josephine, for that clarity. Just to a few issues to add. I think women in mining, particularly when we look at the gender, the issues and the occupational hazards that they're exposed to, women are exposed to a multiplicity of hazards. You've just mentioned some of them, but more importantly, you look at issues of chemical exposures, issues like your silica dust, mercury, for those that are in gold extraction, and even biological hazards themselves, they are quite extensively exposed. So women really take the greater brunt of the occupational hazards in workspaces, and we'll go into a number of issues. For instance, women, even the psychosocial hazards, if we from literature, I find that they are quite much more exposed to psychosocial hazards, and the studies have also shown that more than 60% of women are exposed to psychosocial hazards and suffer from stress, and also issues of musculoskeletal problems as a result of their work roles. So yeah, women are extremely exposed, and they get the greater brunt of occupational hazards. Maybe for the time being, I'll move on to the next section in the next segment with respect to the unique properties or unique circumstances of women. Remember that women are also very different from men in that they also in their childbearing phases. A lot of psychosocial, physiological, and anatomical issues come into play, which makes women much more susceptible to occupational hazards. Maybe let me stop here, then I'll proceed on the next section. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singo and Professor Moyo for the kind of introduction and alluding to some of the key differentiators between women's experience at mine sites and the risks that they face. I think one of the, maybe to shift the focus to a little bit broader, one of the key overarching messages that we see in the report is this importance of enshrining gender equality into legal frameworks. And as Dr. McQuilkin spoke about, the review that was done and the legal analysis of how gender-sensitive mining codes or legal frameworks were in place or not in place in the countries looked at. I'm wondering if one of you could speak a little bit to the role of legal frameworks in gender-sensitive policies in this topic, specifically of occupational health and safety. Are there examples of how legal frameworks are enabling that for women and promoting gender equality? Or is there more work to be done?
Okay, I'll give it a go, then Justine can come in. I think one of the important issues that we see globally and even in specific communities is the paucity of legal occupational health and safety frameworks and even policy and guidance documents. There is a significant gap within the field of occupational health and safety, especially in occupations. And particularly so when we look at women issues in terms of policies enshrining the rights with respect to occupational health and safety, we still have quite a significant deficit in that regard. And it remains quite strategic and very invaluable to ensure that occupational safety and health legal frameworks specifically and deliberately address these gendered issues and look at the aspects even of women in workspaces, and look even at particular circumstances, for instance, during pregnancy, during breastfeeding, and all those issues. So occupational health and safety friendly legal frameworks would actually promote the health and well-being of a lot of women within the mining space. So legal reforms, and even upscaling the provisions of most occupational health and safety policies and legal instruments will go a very long way in terms of protecting women, even from the unique risk and even from the gender issues that are a major problem within workspaces. Over to you, Josephine.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Moyo. In addition to what has been presented, occupational health and safety is a direct product of compliance to policies, acts, and documents. So in national small-scale mining, we have a situation of an informal sector. So there's the need to formalize the sector. At the same time, in the process of formalizing the sector, there is also need to come up with policies on occupational health and safety. If we are to analyze policies from different countries, there are only a few countries which have really tackled policies on health and safety in national small-scale mining. And the situation is worse for women. You can find a legal framework for artisanal small-scale mining talking clearly on occupational safety and health, like in the case of Mongolia. However, if you look at the gendered factors, gender sensitivity, you realize that the legal framework can be quiet on the issues affecting women. So we have organizations and the different investors coming into artisanal small-scale mining. And the only way to get issues affecting women addressed is to have these issues in the policies, because these organizations, the private sector, they comply to existing policies. So if the policy is quiet, there's nothing to comply on. Hence the need to uphold the gender sensitive issues affecting women. When it comes to financing, there should be prioritization of women. When it comes to formalization, there should also be prioritization of women in the policies on formalization. And we need to have these gender sensitive policies so that we can address the issues affecting women. That is the starting point.
Yeah, just a quick add before you come in. One other important issue in terms of the legal frameworks within artisanal and small-scale mining is that within this community, particularly even in the African setting, the issues of socio-cultural beliefs, norms, and myths, they play a significant role that disadvantage women in artisanal and small-scale mining. Even their relegation to menial tasks within workspaces. So legal frameworks should really ideally incorporate those rights, that protection to women, so that they can equally participate within the ASM space. And even in terms of issues of provision of personal protective equipment, which was generally designed for men, there's definitely a need for policies and legal frameworks to have a deliberate inclination and demand to have these things incorporated so that women are also brought into that space, and even including issues of access to general services, like you mentioned earlier, issues of access to health services for maternal, if you look at maternal health and other issues, policies need to deliberately call upon the inclusion or involvement of women across the provision of those services. Thank you.
And
Excellent.
in addition to policies, we also need to empower the women. It's not enough to only have a policy. There are situations where the women, they need to be empowered to formalize. And as Dr. Moy has mentioned, we need to make enabling conditions. We talk of accessing maternal health. We need the services to be available. So there's a lot to be done to address these issues.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Singo and Professor Moyo for those very clear and powerful messages, I think, about the need. We're going to come back to you for the group discussion, but I now want to invite Aline Providence Ekonobisa, who's a co-author of a very practical case study that we had in the State of the Sector report. And so, Aline, if you're there, I'm going to ask you to share your camera, and we're also going to pull up the slides that you shared with us as well. So just as an introduction, while we pull those slides up, Aline is an experienced mining professional who's worked with government, private sector, and civil society in both office and field-based roles. Her expertise is a focus on gender and women empowerment in artisanal and small-scale mining, and she's worked for the government of Rwanda and the Ministry of Natural Resources, as well as for PACT and the Better Sourcing Initiative, covering the topics of responsible supply chain due diligence, managing traceability, mine site inspections, and in 2014, she founded the Rwanda Women in Mining Organization, WIAMO, a local NGO dedicated to the effective integration of women in the Rwandan mining sector. Aline, it's great to have you, and I think your case study is a really practical example of what Dr. Singhal and Professor Moyer were talking about not just having policies, but also having enabling conditions and interventions that are supporting female miners. And so it's a really great case study because it talks about the importance of providing rechargeable head torches to female miners and demonstrates this really practical intervention that can be used to close the gender wage gap and also personal safety gap for women in small-scale mines in Rwanda. So I'm wondering if you can just take us through the team's inspiration for this type of intervention and provide us with an overview of the case study. So over to you.
Thank you very much for having me. I think you hear me all. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Thank you very much. And thanks for Nathan for this introduction. As you mentioned, I work for WIAMO, that is a local NGO that promotes gender equality in Rwanda. And I thank PACT for giving us the chance to work on this case study, illuminating small-scale mining in Rwanda. It's the project we started from 2021 and it's ongoing now. And the aim of this project is to introduce rechargeable head torches in order to replace poor quality disposable battery powered hand torches, which do not give a good and enough bright for miners to work underground and which break easily and cost much money to miners. And another aim is to improve on safety, productivity, and sustainability for more resilient and responsible artisanal and small-scale mining communities. So relating our project with gender, the project focused much on enhancing women's participation in artisanal and small-scale mining, and we relate it with SDG 5 in indicator 522 and 552. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we want to introduce the head torches, which are suitable for mining companies or for mining work, as you can read through the picture from left to right. Next, please. So Rwanda, you heard or you read from somewhere that Rwanda is making so many efforts in promoting gender equality in terms of policy and institutional framework, given constitution, mining law, national gender policy, and other institutions and policies that are there to promote gender equality. But we are still struggling to promote or to increase the women's participation in the mining sector, because we are still lagging behind what the constitution said. Women mining varies between 11.4 to 16% as women's participation in the mining sector. Next, please. So now, coming back to ISMR, or eliminating small-scale mining research findings, we conducted our research within different mines. There were 39 mining companies located in different areas of Rwanda, and our findings was that good quality of lighting through head torches is needed to help miners work effectively, efficiently, and safely, because it helps miners to take much time in tunnels, and they work freely, so they feel safe when they have enough light. So a poor quality of lighting affect women negatively than men, because our mine is still artisanal or small scale, where it's physically hard to move around. So women are vulnerable to GBVs. And we categorize those findings or those negative effects of writing to women in 3 categories, which are emotionally, physical, and financially. So emotionally, women feel unsafe working underground and traveling to and from mine in the dark. So you can imagine how much someone is tortured emotionally when you are standing or working in dark, and how much women are exposed to many issues related to that poor lighting. And physically, women are can be more easily harassed in dark tunnels underground, or from working in their tunnels and going home. So it's related to the first emotional thing, because it's easy to be attacked and to be harassed in dark. And financially, women, during our focus group discussion, women mentioned that according to them, they really want to undertake those well-paying jobs, but because of those poor writing, they prefer it's like to protect themselves from harassment. They prefer to work in those low-paying jobs, which are on ground, instead of going underground. It's like putting boundaries themselves that they can't go beyond in order to fear those harassment. And also it limits them to, the poor writing limits them to take the night shifts and to run other new jobs which are well paid, and which are undertaken in deep underground. So our respondents asking format interviews, we managed to talk with the mine managers, and one mine manager mentioned that they work with 40 miners, but only 2 women miners, they can have that courage to go underground to undertake those well-paid jobs, as we mentioned. But other women, they work on ground, which he said, if we have a good quality of writing, it will help women to go underground, and it will increase their pay job in underground. Next slide, please. So that's all from me. I thank you for this, and for more, you can contact us, or we can have another opportunity to discuss in a group. Thank you.
Thank you, Aline, for that great summary and the insights really around how this research drove the intervention, enabling women to take on those opportunities for higher paying jobs and underground, as well as kind of averting some of those risks that you highlighted around physical and emotional hazards in terms of their participation. I'm going to ask now, invite our other case study author, Gracia Kabilambali, to join us. Gracia, are you able to share your camera and unmute yourself? Gracia will be offering her intervention in French. And so we want everyone to make sure that you have your language setting as English. So you can do this by clicking the 3-dot more option in the taskbar, and then you'll select language and speech from the drop-down menu, and language interpretation, and then you'll go to the English language setting if you'd like to hear it in English, and you can hear it in French by keeping the original audio. So just by way of introduction, Gracia is an agricultural engineer and a member of the Expertise Center on Mining and Governance, known as CEGEMI, at the Catholic University of Bukavu since 2019. She's participated in a number of research projects on health and the environment in the mining sector, including her case study on the women who age too fast in the 2023 report, where her interests cover a variety of topics around the health of women and children ASM, as well as environment and agricultural interactions with mining. She's currently working as a community educator with UNICEF, and is writing another article on women's voice and participation in mining initiatives. So Gracia, it's a pleasure to have you. We're looking forward to hearing a little bit about your case study. If you can share with the participants here Talk to us a little bit about how, what was been the response of your work that you did engaging women to understand their experience at the mine site, and any subsequent interventions or research that's come out of these efforts. So over to you, Gracia.
Thank you. Je vais présenter notre étude de cas sur le sujet concernant le femmes. Donc, ça intitulé « The Women Who Age So Fast ». L'étude avait été menée à Kamituga. C'est l'un des sites miniers du site Kivu, là où il y a une très grande activité minière, notamment pour l'exploitation de l'or. Ce travail qui porte sur la santé et l'environnement, c'est plus concentré sur les activités minières qui ont un impact sur la santé de femmes. L'étude a été effectuée sur plus de 150 femmes. On a fait ça au mois d'avril et au mois d'août. Et on a pu trouver que beaucoup de femmes qui travaillent dans le site minier, ils ne connaissaient pas plus l'impact des activités sur leur santé. Bon, on peut avoir l'autre slide. Oui, dans le site minier, on a pu prendre 4 sites, notamment il y avait Boutoa, il y avait Calvaire, il y avait Menoyanguruwe et il y avait aussi Mobale. Ce sont les 4 sites miniers où il y avait de plus grandes activités minières, où les femmes étaient, et on a fait ça dans le site et autour du site minier. Pour ce qui est de notre site, on a trouvé que beaucoup de femmes qui étaient dans ces sites miniers, ils se plaignaient plus de fatigue. Donc, en ce qui concerne, il y avait des femmes twangaises, celles-là qui ont l'habitude de piler le pierre. Il y avait les femmes Minyangala. Les femmes Minyangala sont celles-là qui se mettent dans l'eau et essaient de faire le triage de pierres pour en extraire par après de l'or. Mais il y avait aussi des accidents. Beaucoup de femmes, malgré qu'on a introduit la technologie avec le concasseur, mais les femmes disent qu'il y a de discrimination vu qu'on leur interdit de s'approcher des concasseurs. Mais il y a ceux-là qui se disent que ce n'est pas de discrimination parce qu'avec le concasseur, il y a eu beaucoup de dégâts, si je peux les dire ainsi. C'est que les femmes, ils ont l'habitude de mettre, dans notre culture africaine, on a l'habitude de mettre de pagnes, de robes amples, alors qu'avec les concasseurs, une fois qu'il y a le courant d'air, beaucoup de femmes étaient prises dans le concasseur, ainsi on parvenait à perdre vie par après. Je prends l'exemple dernièrement quand on était à Kamituga, il y a une femme qu'on avait travaillé avec elle en août, mais arrivée sur place, elle était déjà décédée. Et c'était aussi le problème des concasseurs. Autre problème que les femmes rencontrent dans leurs activités, c'est plus sur leur santé sexuelle. Beaucoup de femmes sont sujettes à des infections urinaires, à des infections sexuellement transmissibles. Ceux d'entre eux avec qui on a essayé de travailler, ils se plaignent souvent d'avoir de grattage vulvaire et cela aide plus à leur activité, surtout les femmes qui s'appellent de Minyangala, entre autres de femmes fesses dans l'eau parce qu'elles se mettent tout au long de la journée sous l'eau pour essayer un peu de travailler. Il y avait aussi un problème lié à la scolarité. Beaucoup de femmes qui sont dans les sites miniers, ils sont obligés de laisser les études pour subvenir aux besoins de leur famille. Principalement, ce sont de femmes, de filles qui ont perdu leurs parents. Il y a de filles qui ont perdu leur mari. Alors, ils sont obligés de subvenir aux besoins de leur famille. D'après nos analyses, 5 facteurs expliquent pourquoi les femmes qui travaillent dans le site minier ne sont pas suffisamment protégées. Entre autres, il y a des femmes qui ont généralement de faibles niveaux de scolarité. On a essayé de trouver qu'au niveau des contextes économiques, elles n'ont pas accès à des sources de revenus alternatives. Parce que ceux d'entre eux se disaient pouvoir faire le commerce s'ils avaient d'autres activités, qu'ils avaient un peu d'argent pour faire du commerce, ils seraient sortis de carrière minière pour se focaliser plus sur leur commerce. Et au niveau des contextes socio-culturels, les femmes sont discriminées et leurs droits ne sont pas du tout respectés. Au niveau institutionnel, le service étatique qui devrait normalement prendre en charge et protéger le travailleur dans le mine, ils ne sont pas capables de le faire en ce qui concerne le femme. Il se focalise encore plus sur les hommes. Et au niveau du système de santé, l'accès aux soins de santé est vraiment trop difficile pour ces femmes qui n'ont pas assez de moyens. D'où on a essayé de prendre de mesures et quelques propositions. Notamment, ce sont les mêmes femmes qui nous ont donné leurs propositions. Concernant leur santé sexuelle, ils ont proposé d'avoir de bandes hygiéniques qu'ils peuvent mettre lorsqu'ils sont en train de travailler sur l'eau. Il y a ceux-là qui ont protégé de gants, d'autres ont protégé de cache-nez, qui vont commencer à mettre à leur lieu de travail. Et pour le service étatique, on a essayé un peu de recommander au service étatique d'essayer de, quand ils mettent en place les outils de protection, de ne pas seulement se focaliser sur les hommes, mais de prendre en compte aussi de femmes qui sont dans le secteur minier, même si elles sont déjà chassées du secteur par rapport à la grossesse, en fait. Donc, il y a beaucoup de femmes qui sont chassées dans le site à cause de la grossesse. Mais nous savons tous, lorsqu'une femme est enceinte, c'est lorsque le besoin pour subvenir aux besoins de son enfant sont plus sacrés. Donc, leur dire de sortir du site minier, ça ne leur avantage pas. Elles sont obligées d'y partir, d'où les avortements à répétition qui sont en train de connaître. Donc, on peut passer sur l'autre slide. Bon, j'essaie un peu de tout parcourir en même temps. Et je ne sais pas si vous avez capté tout ce que j'ai dit.
Yes, Gracia, I think that was an excellent intervention. I think it covered a variety of topics, which was really important and a part of our discussion. And maybe what we can do now is open up the discussion. I would like to invite back Professor Moyo and Dr. Singo and Aline to the screen. And Gracia, please do stay as well for an open discussion we can have as a group around some of these topics that have been raised and have come up. And so if folks in the audience do have questions, please do either raise your hand or put those questions in the chat box so we can have a discussion here with the remaining time that we have. Maybe just one of the question or points that I'll kind of start our discussion with is I think what we've heard from both the case studies as well as from the chapter is really making the case that there's this need for more holistic approaches to addressing females' health problems and experiences of occupational health and safety in the ASM sector. And so this means looking at things not just from a legal perspective like we talked about, but also the enabling environment and creating conditions. But I think there's also this dynamic we've alluded to around the work being done on social and cultural dynamics that have marginalized females' participation in the sector. And so I'm wondering if anyone would want to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the work that they've maybe done or have seen done around addressing those social and cultural dynamics that impact females' participation in the sector. Anyone want to jump on that question? Bisha, anyone?
Maybe come again. I missed the first part of the question, unless if someone can go ahead on the social.
Let me try to, yeah. I think one of the things we've alluded to is the social and cultural dynamics that are also at play in terms of females' access to the mines and ability. As in Gracia's case study, she spoke about women not being allowed to use machines specifically at mine sites, right? And that perception, I think, culturally, or the practice of women not being allowed to be at mine sites when they're during their menstrual periods. And so that those different dynamics that are also at play, not just from the physical standpoint of mine safety, but also barriers to women's participation in the sector. Is that something that anyone would want to speak to in terms of the intervention that they've done when it comes to improving assessing occupational health and safety and gender differences?
Oh, okay, thank you. Let me just shed some insights. That remains one of the most challenging issues to deal with, especially the cultural or the social cultural dynamics, because it's something that is ingrained even up to the current age. You find that women have been relegated either to the menial tasks, or they are not allowed to get to where the mineral resources, like especially during their menstrual cycles or being seen as a lesser or an inferior part of the mining cascade. So that remains quite a huge problem in mind. And I think one of the issues to get this, like we mentioned earlier on, will be issues of legal reforms and policy guidance and awareness campaigns across workplaces, because these are societal issues and culture which are ingrained in people's minds, and it's really difficult. But however, I think through more awareness, more sessions, more teachings and trainings on the basics and fundamentals of the role of women across workplaces, that will make for a better workplace going into the future. But that requires a deliberate, concerted effort, not only from policymakers, but from within the male counterparts in the workspaces. But yes, we've got other governing institutions for artisanal and small-scale miners, particularly their associations and also the traditional leadership in the area. There is need for quite increased awareness on the rights of women in terms of their equal and active participation in the mining area. So we need to closely and aggressively advocate for these rights of women at workplaces, and also try and manage these cultural and social circumstances and intricacies that women face. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Moyo. I have one case of an intervention which was done, it was the virtue gem in the gemstones during COVID-19. There was a program which was the empowering women to access markets through implementing the mining standards, such as the craft code, so that they will have responsible gemstones on the market. So during this intervention, the women who were in gemstone mining, I think it was in Malawi, so there was a training on equal participation. So one woman took the courage. So what she used to do, what was reported was that she used to come out when she was on a menstrual cycle. She would come out and say, today I'm on my cycle and we got these gemstones. So this thing you are saying is not true. So men didn't like that discussion. It was not comfortable for them. So they just left the women. And in that case, women managed to work together with men in the tunnels, because she would declare, oh, today I'm on, but we got the gemstones. So this thing is not true. So that helped in that intervention. And in Uganda, there was another project which was on EPRM project. So when we were doing the evaluation, there was training on financial literacy. So what was raised by the women is the fact that if you isolate the women, you train them on financial literacy, you don't train the men, you don't train the children. The women, when they are trying to implement, the men are going to ask for the money and the intervention is not going to be effective. So the women, they raised the point of integrating men. When we are talking about empowering women, the women cannot speak to the men in the community. So we need to bring the women, we bring the men, we bring the topic, and everyone is aware. And like what Dr. Moy has mentioned, you can even bring the community leaders, like what was the case with the HIV and AIDS. There was a point where the community leaders were engaged to introduce the topic. So people are believing their belief system. So if it's coming from the community leaders, it's more likely to be taken. So we need the entry point in the communities to address these issues.
Some points. I don't know if Alina or Gracia want to come in on this, but I do see we also have a question from the audience. Maybe we can, Aline, do you want to come in? Go ahead. I think you're muted, Aline.
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I want to emphasize on something that Josephine and Moyo said on the engaging men in the process, because other challenges that are faced on the field is that men always feel uncomfortable, like as if working with women, it's a burden, as if they are producing much, and then women are trying to maximize their opportunities while they didn't contribute in the mining work. While women also are engaged in different activities, being transportation, being cleaning. And I think all those activities are complementing each other. Men cannot be there alone. So I think engaging men is an important thing, but also the community, the awareness raising from the bottom level, then just hear that or understand that women have rights, equal rights to work in mining as men. That's all. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Maybe we can hear from our participant, I think Sharif, SOW, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Bonjour. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Feel free to
Yeah.
speak in French.
I will speak in French. Is it okay?
Yes, wonderful. Go ahead.
J'ai juste quelques contributions en fait par rapport à. J'appelle du Sénégal. Donc voilà, avec partager un peu l'expérience de la sous-région ouest-africaine par rapport à la question du rôle des femmes dans l'exploitation minière artisanale et à petite échelle. Donc au Sénégal, moi j'avais dirigé une étude dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre des plans d'action relatifs à la convention de Minamata, sur le plan d'action. Et effectivement, on était autour de 50% de femmes qui étaient impliquées dans l'exploitation minière artisanale. Mais malheureusement, elles jouent un second rôle dans le cadre de cette activité. Donc, elles sont, soit elles travaillent individuellement de façon vraiment insécure, ou bien elles travaillent au niveau des puits, mais en ayant un rôle vraiment très réduit à tirer les cordes. Donc, ce qui pose un réel problème. Par rapport maintenant au Sénégal, j'ai parcouru la plupart des sites, mais j'ai vu que deux femmes responsables de sites. Deux femmes responsables de sites, mais malheureusement, l'une pratiquement a délégué les pouvoirs à son mari, l'autre a délégué ses pouvoirs à son fils. Donc, le manque de leadership à ce niveau-là est vraiment criard. Donc, je crois que pour moi, il faut faire des efforts à partir de là, former les femmes, les informer du rôle qu'elles pourraient jouer dans le cadre de cette exploitation. Mais également aujourd'hui, avec le développement des législations, aussi les sensibiliser par rapport à la possibilité pour elles aussi de pouvoir faire des demandes d'autorisation pour pouvoir acquérir les ressources de façon légale et exploiter comme les hommes. Voilà, pour ne pas être trop long. Par rapport à l'exposition, les questions sont également, elles sont très exposées. Une femme qui tire les cordes, vous voyez ce que ça fait en termes de pénibilité du travail, qui concasse les pierres. Donc là aussi, vous constatez la dureté du travail, mais également, surtout, à l'exposition au mercure avec leurs enfants. Donc souvent, c'est elles qui font les finitions en termes d'amalgamation, mais également pour aller vendre le minerai, le concentré, l'amalgame au niveau de l'acheteur qui brûle devant eux avec des enfants sur le dos ou bien autour et aussi dans le village. Voilà les contributions que je voulais apporter juste par rapport à cette thématique-là. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry, for that that overview or an example really in the context of Senegal. And I don't, if for our panelists, if you were able to hear that as well with the translation, it was a strong indication really of some of the challenges that we highlight in the report itself, as well as I think are seen in a number of other contexts. I see Gracia, maybe you would like to respond. You have your hand up. Feel free to jump in here.
Oui. En fait, je voulais aussi apporter un ajout par rapport à ce que Chérif a dit, en ce qui concerne les femmes qui sont propriétaires de mines. On prend l'exemple d'une dame, elle est vraiment reconnue au site Kivu, il y a Mama Emilienne. Elle est propriétaire d'un puits au niveau de Détroit. Elle a déjà tout le papier nécessaire pour faire l'exploitation et elle fait aussi l'exploitation dans le mine. Non pas qu'elle est seulement propriétaire de son puits, mais elle entre aussi dans le puits pour y travailler. Elle fait plus travailler les hommes encore dans son puits. Mais jusque-là, certes qu'elle est arrivée à ce point d'avoir son puits et d'y travailler, mais elle est encore sujette à beaucoup de discrimination parce que la société n'accepte pas. Ils disent qu'avec elle, il y a eu beaucoup de sacrifices. On a même collé la mort qui s'est passée dernièrement au niveau de Détroit sur sa tête, que c'est parce qu'elle était en train d'exploiter et entrer dans le puits. C'est lorsqu'il y a eu assez de personnes qui sont décédées. Il y avait 82 morts pratiquement. Mais ce que moi je dis, elle apporte plus en fait à la communauté par rapport à ce qu'elle fait parce qu'avec sa coopérative, elle encadre plus les femmes. Certes qu'elle fait travailler les hommes parce qu'elle se dit qu'il y a beaucoup de travail que les femmes ne sauront pas faire. Juste en entrant dans le puits, elle, en tant que femme, elle se fatigue plus vite. Elle est obligée de dire aux hommes de l'aider, mais malgré cela, les hommes ne la respectent pas à sa juste valeur. On la prend pour une femme qui est trop imposante, une femme qui se rebelle face à la société, face à nos coutumes, ici au niveau du site Kivu. Donc, ce que moi je peux dire, c'est qu'il faudra peut-être qu'on puisse encore revérifier sur le travail de femmes dans le mine. Beaucoup de femmes se disent qu'ils peuvent se reconvertir en d'autres activités. Peut-être que c'est parce que c'est ce qu'on leur a inculqué dans leur esprit. Que les gens puissent essayer d'améliorer leurs conditions de vie et leur travail au niveau de sites miniers, dans le site minier, et pas tout le temps penser qu'elles sont juste des victimes. Parce que je prends l'exemple d'une femme avec laquelle on a travaillé, elle a des champs. Elle a la possibilité de nourrir, d'exploiter son champ. Mais elles se disent que l'activité minière leur apporte de revenus journalièrement. Alors que pour l'agriculture, elle est obligée de patienter la saison culturelle, de patienter que ça puisse pousser, tout ça. Alors elle s'est dit, mais les enfants vont mourir de faim si elle était juste dans l'agriculture. Et même si elle partait vendre, rien ne la prouve qu'elle ne va pas tomber en faillite. Du coup, la seule option pour eux, c'est de rester dans le mine, mais de voir comment le protéger et comment parvenir à améliorer leurs conditions de vie là au niveau de sites miniers. Et pas tout le temps qu'on puisse penser que non, il faudra les enlever parce qu'elles les disent. Parce que tout ce qu'on peut proposer comme solution de travaux manuels, il y a eu beaucoup de ONG au site qui partent dans le site minier pour leur apprendre tous ces genres de travaux. On leur a distribué de machines à coudre, de vaches, tout ça. Mais quand ils ont faim, ils sont obligés de rentrer dans le site minier. Il y a beaucoup de recherches qui ont été effectuées, mais on n'a jamais pensé à comment améliorer leur situation de vie, leurs conditions de vie dans le travail qu'ils sont en train de faire. C'est ça l'ajout que je voulais un peu apporter.
Yeah. Thank you, Gracia, for that additional kind of examples of the context in DRC and those stories. I think that provide important relevation, they reveal some of the dynamics when it comes to the relevance of the sector as a critical livelihood for women, in mining communities, and the need to really figure out, as we argue in the report, how can we account for those gender differences to enable women's participation equally and equitably in at mine sites alongside men, and really doing that through powerful intervention. So thank you for sharing that. I know we're over time here, so I don't want to cut the discussion short, but I just want to thank everyone for coming and joining. And I want to offer the chance, if our speakers would like to share any kind of parting thought, one word maybe, or kind of a point that you'd like to emphasize around this specific issue that I think's been emerging today. What can be done going forward to really support women in terms of this accounting for gender differences in occupational health and safety at mine sites, but also even just more broadly, female achieving gender equality in the sector. So if any of our speakers would like to give our audience just kind of a final thought, or kind of what you would see as that one intervention, or what is needed, we'll leave it there. So anyone want to jump in with a final thought? Professor Moyo?
Yes, it is important that all activities around artisanal and small-scale mining, whether it's products distribution or the services that are delivered, they must be gender sensitive and deliberately focus or accommodate women within the ASM. Let's remember, women, they also carry the unborn child who is exposed to occupational hazards, and we need to take care of that. So in every aspect, all processes, all legal frameworks, all activities must be gender sensitive and prioritize the needs of women in mining. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moyo. Aline, Josephine, or Gracia, would you like to come in here?
Yeah, thank you very much. What we can take home as a whole for women's involvement in ASM, I just want to emphasize on creating a conducive working environment to women, because as our case study showed, that women are much more uncomfortable in mining work when there is different issues related to safety, related to gender, like women's physical condition, biological conditions. And also we do have some good policies and good laws, but we need more enforcement, more effort for them to be really having effects on women's involvement in the mining sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Aline.
Thank you
Josephine?
very much. Thank you very much for the discussion. So we need to move on, and we need to consider a holistic approach. We look at the woman in a context. We look at the environmental factors. We look at the cultural factors, as well as the economic factors, so that we come up with a holistic approach addressing the issue of the women. And we need multi-stakeholders to come together. For example, if you look at the issue of maternal child health, we have existing interventions on maternal health. And if you look at issues such as TB, we have TB treatment happening next door, but it's not reaching to the minors, it's not reaching to the women. So we need a multi-stakeholder approach. We bring different multi-stakeholders together. Let's have the men in the discussion. Let's have the community leaders, traditional leaders, association leaders, and we tackle the problem together. And let's empower women and create an enabling environment.
Thank you, Josephine. Gracia, feel free to come in here.
En fait, ma connexion Internet n'est pas du tout bonne. Hein? Je n'ai pas très bien capté.
Okay. I think, Gracia, if you'd like to speak in a final word or intervention for the audience, just as a take home from this conversation. we will give you the floor. I think we're
Est-ce que vous
having...
me captez? Vous me captez?
Yes, we can hear you.
Ok, je ne sais pas s'il y avait une question parce que ma connexion Internet faisait un peu de faux, je ne capte pas très bien.
Okay, I'm sorry if you're experiencing difficulties, Gracia. The question was about just a final intervention, if you'd like to share with the group as a take home from this conversation, what you would recommend.
Can you repeat, please?
Gracia, do you have a final word you would like to share with our audience today? A final word?
Ok. Bon, en fait, en dernier lieu, ce que moi je peux dire, c'est que il faudra qu'on puisse parvenir aussi à protéger les femmes dans le site minier. S'il peut y avoir de lois spécifiques pour les femmes, je pense que ça peut faire une très grande différence. Et aussi, ça peut apporter quelque chose par rapport aux recherches qu'on est en train de faire, parce que plus les lois sont applicables pour les hommes, mais aussi essayer de voir comment concilier les activités minières de femmes, essayer de les concilier aussi avec l'agriculture, parce que c'est la base. Je pense que si dans nos recherches, on parvenait à lier les deux points, je pense que beaucoup de femmes vont plus se retrouver et leur travail sera mieux rémunéré et mieux alléchante. Elles ne seront pas là en train de se plaindre juste de la pénibilité du travail, parce que pour moi, la pénibilité du travail dépend aussi de leurs conditions économiques. Alors que si parvenaient à concilier les deux, je pense que ça peut faire quand même une très grande différence par rapport à tout ce qu'on fait. Merci.
Excellent. Thank you, Gracia, and thank you, Professor Moyo and Dr. Singo and Aline for those comments and interventions and for this discussion, rich discussion today. I hope that it's been beneficial to everyone that's participated and listened in, and then those that will watch this recording in the future. We are going to have another event in the week of April 8th coming up to talk about the final chapter of the State of the Sector report. So please do join us for that. But I think really it's been a powerful session today, and I thank our speakers for their interventions. And I think the message that Josephine spoke about of having a multi-stakeholder approach and needing to take a holistic perspective, addressing all of the social, cultural, economic, legal aspects of this issue and really bringing to bear women's this issue of promoting gender equality in the sector is an important one that we carry forward in the report, and we hope that we can continue through the work that you all are doing and we can support through DELF. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully in April 8th or April 9th at our next virtual event. Thank you very much to all our speakers as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.